Hello everyone and welcome to the Wildlife Sandbox 2 Basics tutorial. We have a lot to cover, so let's get started. First things first, in order to use the sandbox, you have to be in the sandbox game mode. So let's start the sandbox game. And for the sake of this video, I will choose the empty showroom and make an empty new version of it. Then I will quickly make it into the sky version so that we can see better what's going on. And now we start the Sandbox 2 editor. To open up the Sandbox 2 editor, you click the Tab key. So let's do that. Now we are greeted with a basic UI and a different control for the camera. So how do you control the camera? You hold the right mouse button and you can start to look around. While the mouse button is held, you can also use the WASD to move forward, backward, left and right, as well as the Q and E to move up and down. If the camera moves too fast, you can also slow it down by scrolling either up or down. This helps you if you want to set up and align the camera closer to smaller targets, such as characters' faces in close-up. Next up, let's look at the UI. So the first thing that I want to show you is you can collapse the UI with this little arrow button here, and that'll basically make the whole thing disappear, in case you want to have a bigger screen to look at stuff. Additionally, what still works is from the main game settings is the hide UI feature. So you can still click your hide UI button and it'll hide the entire UI. To find out what button that is, please see the input settings. Next up is looking at the buttons that we see up here. So first thing that I want to show you is the show key map button. This question mark here, which will open up a little map that shows you some of the most important keys and operations that you can do for your Sandbox 2 editor. We will show most of these in this video, so let's go on. The next button is the toggle character visibility. This toggles the visibility of your player character that you have spawned within when you started the level. So I can click it and now you can see my Maya is gone. Click it again and she is back in. The next button is the toggle Gizmo visibility. We will see what it does a little bit later. Next, let's look at these tabs. First we have the sex scenes tab, which is just a little button for adding new sex scene. Then we have the poses tab to add a new pose. This is for single character poses. And next up we have the props tab, which then opens up a little toolbar down here with a bunch of different icons for the different types of props. It also shows you in here, this is long empty space, and this is your outliner. So for the sake of demonstration, I will now quickly spawn a prop. And now you can see it appears in here. The outliner is split into two parts. The first part at the top shows you all the placed props. The second part at the bottom is for settings that a potential prop might have. If you deselect the prop, the settings per section disappears. Reselect it, it'll appear back. You can also customize the distribution of space for these two modes by clicking and dragging the separator in the middle. That is it for the basic UI. Next up, we will look at more details when using and props and the gizmo. Thank you very much. So now that we have an object spawned, this gizmo popped up and a couple of more elements up here appeared. So let's go over them. At the top left, we have the move, rotate and scale operation buttons. So we can click these buttons to change the mode of our gizmo to the operation respectively. You can also click the W, E and R key as highlighted on the tooltip to quickly navigate between these modes. Next up is the local and world space manipulation modes. You can see right now we are in world space and the axes of the object are aligned with the level's coordinates. If we go to local space, the axis aligned with the rotation of the object itself. And this works for rotation and scale as well. Next up is the gizmo size. You can resize your gizmo if it appears too small or too big on your screen with this little slider here. The next thing is this input field that allows you to input values for position, rotation, and scale numerically. So we can, for example, round the values of this field here by typing in 2630, and it'll snap it to that value on the coordinate system. Alternatively, you can also click and drag to where it says, till it shows up this little draggy arrow icon to move the object like so. This works similarly for rotation and scale as well. Next, let's look at the gizmo itself. It consists of three different elements. First is the individual axis arrows. Second is the planes for the planar movement. And third is the white ball in the middle. So the individual axes constrain the movement of the object to the selected axis. The planes constrain it to the selected axis plane. And the ball in the middle constrains it to the camera that you are looking from. On the rotation side of things, we have the three axes as usual. You can click one of them and rotate it along that axis specifically, or you can also click into the middle of the object, not selecting any axis precisely, and rotate it freely along all three axes. On scale, you can select the box in the middle to scale it uniformly, or select any of the axes to scale it in that axis only. Okay, now we look at the outliner in here. So we have three buttons. Let's quickly go over these. The I button in here toggles the visibility of the selected object. The crosshairs button focuses the camera onto the center of the object, or the pivot of it. The X deletes the object. Alternatively, I can also click the delete key. Now let's place some objects. So there's multiple ways to place objects. We can either click and select a cube from here or any asset, and then it's appearing on our cursor, and then we can click again to release it into the world. We can also click, hold, and drag it into the world. And additionally, if you want to place multiple objects a lot faster, we can also, while the object is on our cursor ready to be selected, hold the shift key and then start to click into the world while we move our cursor. And we can spam multiple objects. With escape, we can remove the object from our placement mode. If we want to duplicate objects already in the scene, we can also do that. To do that, we select an object and then we hit the Ctrl D key, and that'll create a copy on top of the first one. And if we now drag out, you can see the original is still there. Alternatively, we can also click and hold an axis or a plane and then spam the Ctrl D key while having the thing clicked and held, and then drag into the level to place multiple objects fast like this, or duplicate them rather. Now, what if I want to move this cube to this location? I can do one thing, which is, awkwardly move, then align the camera some more and try to get it over there like this. I can also, if I focus on here a little bit more, have the camera move along with it. To do that, we click and hold the axis, then we hold the shift key and then move in one direction. And now you can see the object moves and the camera goes along for the ride. The distance from the camera to the object will determine the sensitivity of the motion. So if I go further back and now do this thing again, you can see it moves a lot faster. Alternatively, if I zoom in and do this again, it moves now a lot slower. Now let's show you some selection strategies. So you can select objects in the viewport by just left clicking on them. You can also, here, you can also select them in the outliner by left clicking on them. You can control select to add objects to your selection, and this works in the outliner as well as in the viewport. You can also select an object and then shift select another object further away to select all the objects in between on the outliner. Additionally, we can also select everything in a specific tab by clicking the Ctrl A key. and it'll select everything. So that was it for the props. Let's delete these guys. And next up, we will move to the poses. Let's spawn a pose by going to the Poses tab and then clicking the Add New Pose button. This UI shows us few settings. First we have the skeleton and then the preset. The skeleton is the main character that other character variations and different characters are then based on the proportions of the character. So for example, we have the Maya, which is the main character of the standard female human, and then the preset then shows us all the characters that share her skeleton or custom presets that we may have saved for the skeleton. So let's click, for example, Shannon and place her. So now that she has been placed, we have this section of the UI here, which is fairly similar to how it's been before. We have the Poser tab and the Customizer tab. The Customizer tab is something for an own video, so we'll not go in here, but in here you can change things like eyes, hair, skin, clothes, and some body properties. Let's keep at the Poser. The first thing that we can change here is the speed slider, which will adjust the speed of the playing animation. In this case, it's the idle, because the idle has been selected in this slider to be fully active. So I can make it faster, and I can make it slow down to pretty much 0. Additionally, I can turn off the idle completely, and that will make sure that this pose highlighted by the yellow border is being enabled fully. Next up, we can merge or combine two different poses. So for example, let's go in here and choose, for example, something like standing pinup. And then with this slider here, we can basically interpolate between these two poses. And you can see the yellow border is starting to showcase the effect until we reach the other side, and eventually the bottom selector is fully highlighted. Similar for the face. You can see now her face idle is playing. We can lower this slider to 0 and the pose underneath becomes active. Similarly as with the body, we can blend two different poses with this slider right here. We also have a lookout feature. The nothing will basically do nothing and have the head and eyes follow completely the animations set in above. We can also select direction, which will open up a 2D selector here, and we can, with this thing, control the direction that the character is looking. Additionally, we can also pick camera, and that will make that so that the character always tries to, let me make it slower a little bit, to follow the camera. Further down, we have a couple of toggles for different sections of physics for the body, and that's pretty much it for the poser. Next up, let's look at the sex scene spawner. To do that, I'm going to quickly exit out of the Sandbox 2 editor and make the room dark again, so we don't accidentally show something that my make YouTube do not like it. So I click tab again to open up the Sandbox 2 editor, and now in the sex scenes tab we can click the add new scenes. In here we have 4 columns of the sex scene UI. Let's go from left to right. On the left side we have a listing of all the available character and groupings. This is being sorted by the number of actors, starting from solo all the way down to very large groups. Secondarily, it's been sorted alphabetically. We can filter additionally by changing things in here. So we can, for example, remove all the males, and then we will only see pairings with female characters, and apparently also non-sexuals. We can also then do stuff to get very specific things, like for example, we do not want to have any Kerpali or any lizardmen involved. and we don't want to have any footer involved, and we only want duo animations. So now we only get the duo animations for male and female humans. Additionally, in order to help you figure out which character goes where, we have this character legend, which opens up this little info sheet and shows you quickly which is the main character within a skeleton and what characters are sharing that skeletal proportion. So for example, here's a list of all the characters that are belonging to the Maya skeleton, starting with the Maya itself. Same with Suri and all the other characters in the game listed respectively. Just a quick help to help you figure out which character goes where. So once we have selected our animation, let's go here with the classic Max and Maya pairing. It will basically populate the next list on the right with all available animations for this pairing specifically. You can also see here there's a P letter next to some. And what this is indicating animations that have progression. So a progression means, in difference to the ones that don't have it, the non-progression animations are basically single poses. So for example, blowjob C. And there may be a variation to blowjob C, which we will come to in a bit, but it will just be this pose. The progression is a complete sequence within the respective pose. So for example, for blowjob A, if we click it to load it into the animation queue, and then go down here to the settings, we can see that we have the different stages of the animation. We have the idle, the foreplay, the main loop, and then climax inside and outside for stuff like cream pies versus facials, for example. We can populate the playlist here with some more. Here it's called animation queue. We can also reorder them by clicking and dragging like so. And per animation, we can also adjust the settings that you know from the classic sex scene player. I will quickly explain what they do here. So we have the speed slider, which is a general speed slider to play the animation very slowly or very quickly. We have the amplitude, which is a randomness slider. So an amplitude of 0 will have no randomness to the speed of the animation, and it will always play with the speed. Having an amplitude above 0, for example full, will additionally to the speed change the speed of the animation randomly. With the smoothness, we can change how soft the transitions between slow and fast speeds should be. Low smoothness will make them very erratic, and high smoothness will make them very soft transition and feel very organically. Additionally, we can reset the sliders to the default by clicking the curved arrow here. We can then also select the variations for type A and B. As shown in the tooltip here, the variations A are generally reserved for anal vaginal, but they can change if there is no penetration involved in the animation. Variation B is more of a secondary animation that can be pretty much anything. Animations that have both variations available will have them listed as so. Animations that don't have any other type animation available will only list the ones relevant to the animation themselves. We can also change the duration of the animation in the playlist in seconds. Additionally, we can select the looped key, which will loop the playlist back to the beginning once it reached the end of the last animation. We can turn it off and it will remain on the last animation forever. Once we have selected the playlist that we want, we can change the actors that we want to have. In this case, within the Max skeleton, we can pick all the different characters for Max, and in the Maya skeleton, all the ones for Maya. Once we have done that, we are ready to place, and I can click the place key. So I'm deliberately placing them here on the dark side because I don't want this to be too visible for YouTube, not to go crazy about it. With the sex scene selected, we have now, with the sex scene placed, we can now have this customizer here, which allows us to customize the characters further. This will become its own video eventually. You can select which character you want to customize by selecting them here in the drop-down. If you want to change an animation that you have already placed, you can click the edit scene in here, and it will open up this editor again with the lack of the first section here to select the actors. You can then here get a full list of the available animations for these two characters, and you can add more, you can remove existing ones, you can reorder them, and then you can click save again. You can also change the settings here if you want to have something different. The quality of life of this will improve in the next release. That is it for sexy in placement. Next up is saving and loading the level. Now that we have some things placed in here, let's save the level. For that we can click the save key down, the save button up here, or simply click Ctrl S. It will open up this dialog to input a name, test24 for example, hit save, and it will tell you where it saved it in this notification up on the top right. We can also save as, in order to save it as a new level, because if we now hit save again, it will no longer ask us for the dialog, it will automatically save the file that we have created. We can click load to load a level. If we click one of these names here, it will basically open up the level and discard what we had before. Additionally, I can also load one of these things into my existing level by clicking the load additively checkbox up here. That is it for saving and loading. If you want to see more about that, you can also check the show key map, and you can see here some of the hotkeys for saving. For example, Ctrl S and Ctrl Alt S for save as. That is it for this basics video. In another video, we will go over the details of the placeable props. But yeah, that's for another one. Thank you very much for watching, and see you next time.